So I have a huge confession to make. I don't know anything about climate science. And for a UCC pastor, that might be a bad place to be, because we have this initiative, you see, for the next 3 years that's called Love of Children, Love of Neighbor, Love of Creation. And we're supposed to be encouraging our churches to participate in those things and show the denomination pictures of how we're doing that sort of stuff. And as I remembered this week that Earth Day was coming up, I thought, well, yeah, let's just talk about that. Let's talk about love of creation. That's a UCC thing. And then I started researching, and I realized that I don't know jack about climate change. I don't know anything about the environment. Because I would tell you that primarily who I am as a person, if there's going to be a social justice issue that I'm going to take up and I'm going to lead the charge on, it's going to be one of three things basically. First, it's going to be standing on the front lines for my LGBTQIA brothers and sisters to be treated as equally as I have been treated my entire life. The second one is gun violence. And the third one is racism. For those folks of color to be treated as well and as equally and with as much equity as I have been all of my life. Those are the three issues that I find myself drawn to every time that something comes up about whatever issue needs to be spoken to in this world. And for whatever reason, for whoever I am, because I think I grew up in the country. I grew up in the country, and I kind of took all of that for granted. I took for granted that the beauty was always going to be around me. I have not yet in my life centered in on what it means to think about the way that we are destroying the planet that God gave to us. Now, before we go any further, let me make this perfectly clear. I do not see climate science, climate change as a political issue. It is a spiritual issue that has been taken and appropriated into the political realm, because when you appropriate an issue into the political realm, guess what you have the opportunity to do? You have the opportunity to try and gain power over another person. And when you leave it in the political realm, then what becomes of it is fighting. But climate change, taking care of our environment, taking care of this great world that God has given to us, so much is a spiritual issue. And we have forgotten that it's a spiritual issue when, as I told the children, you take a balled up Kleenex and you toss it out your window without thinking about it, because you think, well, it'll biodegrade it someday. It's what a big deal. It's not a big deal. And you toss it out your window. That's a spiritual issue, because when you're offending the creation of God, you are offending God. You see, every time I roll down my window and I spit my gum out the window, like I am apt to do, because I get tired of it and I just spit it out the window, it's going to be there for decades probably before it biodegrades. It's like I'm spitting out the window on the creator of all of this. And I don't realize that most of the time, what that says is that my spirit is not right with God if I can harm God's creation. I got to tell you, that's about as far as I got this week with this idea of climate science, climate change, taking care of our environment. I had somebody say to me recently, well, aren't you a tree hugger, Pastor Jana? Well, yeah, in the sense that I love the trees, and in the sense that I don't like to see animals hurt in any reason. White rhinos gone for our own greed and our own convenience. I'm a tree hugger in the sense that I like everybody to have clean water Flint, Michigan, still without clean water after all these years. What's it been, 4 years since we found out about Flint, Michigan? Flint, Michigan, still without clean water. Puerto Rico, how many months after Hurricane Maria hit them? 6, 8 months, still without power, still without clean water, still without basic supplies. I'm a tree hugger in the sense that I want people to be able to be safe in this world. But I'm not really a tree hugger in the sense that I have taken this on as a spiritual issue that I need to wrestle with myself about. I don't look myself in the mirror in the morning and say, hey, did you go out there and love that tree today? But I look myself in the mirror at the end of the night and say, did I do anything to offend a brother or sister? Forgive me for that. I never ask for forgiveness about the fact that, maybe this one bottle that I have, I'm just going to toss it in the regular trash today. I never ask for forgiveness when in reality, I need to ask for forgiveness for that. Because that is offensive to the creation that God has provided for us. I told the children this morning about that massive thing in the ocean. Now let me tell you, when I sat down to start researching about climate science and climate change and all of that sort of stuff, the number one thing that I discovered very quickly is, wow, this is going to take years to figure this out. Because there is so much data out there about what's going on. So I focused in on that one thing that I had heard about in the news, that there's this massive growing pile of plastic and garbage in the Pacific Ocean between Hawaii and California. And I went to a site last night to find out how big that thing was, and I might have gotten it wrong. It might not be 22 million square miles. It might be 22 million square kilometers. I don't know. But it's big, okay? It's the size of Texas. It's bigger than France, right? And what is in the midst of all of that is not necessarily all of this kind of stuff. What is in the midst of that is broken fish lines, broken fish nets that are then catching things like this that get put into the ocean. And the more that things get put into the ocean, the bigger the garbage pile gets. Now, can you imagine that perhaps maybe someday in our lifetime, people will be reporting on television, the garbage pile in the Pacific Ocean stretches from the coast of California to the coast of Hawaii. Could you imagine that would happen? The place where I went last night to learn about this, it was ticking off how fast that garbage pile is growing per kilometer or per mile, whatever it is. As I was reading online, it was ticking off, and it changed from 22,965,870 something to be 22,965,880 something. That's how fast we are destroying the world. That's how much our spirits are harming the spirit of God's creation. Now, some folks might say, well, this isn't really proven. There's no data behind all of this. There is. There's a lot of data, but like I said, let's take it out of the political realm. And let's just focus in on how desperately our world needs us to become the stewards of this creation that God has asked us to be. You see, this is a spiritual issue because from the very first chapter of the very first book of the Bible, God starts talking about the creation. And as you read further in Genesis, you realize that God has asked us to be the caretakers of the world, not the dominionists of the world. I had a friend once who was much more conservative than I am in every aspect. And we had a conversation about the book of Genesis, and I was focusing in on how we're supposed to be caring for the creation. And that person's point of view was to say to me, but we have dominion over the earth. We can do to it whatever we want. That's not how that word is supposed to be translated. Not dominion, meaning that we can do whatever we want. We can dump chemical waste into the water waste. We can cut down all of the trees that we want to cut down in the world. We can put out all the carbon emissions that we want to put out in the world. That's not what that means. Dominion in that sense means that we are entrusted with caring for this world. We are entrusted with the preciousness of God's creation around us. And we have not done a very good job. So after I stopped focusing on the big garbage pile that's growing, I found this site that says, what's your carbon footprint? Everybody know what a carbon footprint is? It's how much damage you are doing to the world per year, right? So it asks you, how many trips and airlines, sorry Glenn, how many airline trips do you take every year, more than 2,500 miles? How many airline trips do you take 300 to 2,500 miles? How many airline trips under 300 miles do you take? It asks you how many cars you have. It asks you what kind of car mileage your car has. It asks you what kind of energy appliances you have at home, all this sort of stuff. And do you know that I found out that just me, myself, alone by myself, I am putting out 5 metric tons of carbon more than the average person in the United States of America. And do you know why? Because I can't get up on what my mother used to call my Shanks horses and walk 2 blocks to go to the Shell station to get myself a bottle of water. I have to get in my car and drive over there. And do you know that that means that if I was to ever try and help recover the carbon footprint that I'm making in the world in a meaningful, moving way, I would have to plant 352 trees this year somewhere. Because it takes 352 trees in the world just to undo the damage that I myself am doing. Now, multiply that by all of us in here. Even if we averaged out that we were putting 19 cubic or metric tons of carbon into the world every year as a congregation, we would still need to plant almost 300 trees to undo that damage that we're doing together. Exponentially, we're killing our world. So if you want to know how to help, go online, because you've got a lot of reading to do. If you want to know how to help, the first step is thinking about what my old teacher, Mr. Avery, used to teach us. You see, he was the kind of guy that would threaten pain to get the point across, right? But think about how every piece of litter that we throw on the ground is somehow going to cause us pain in the long run. Think about how every time we don't work to clean up the water supplies, we don't work to help the deforestation in the world, we don't work to help limit carbon emissions, think about how all of that in the long run will not only punish us, but will punish those grandbabies who lay beside us and sing and rub our arms. Think about how it will punish their grandbabies in this world. But more than that, what I would like you to do is I would like you to ask yourself this very tough question that I asked myself yesterday, and that is, what in the world is wrong with my spirit that I haven't taken this seriously enough? What is wrong with me in my spiritual walk with God that I have thought about creation as an afterthought? You see, I'm really good with humanity, right? I'm really good with being on the forefront of helping humanity. But there's going to be no humanity if this world fails. Humanity is going to be gone. And when I asked myself that question yesterday about what is wrong in my spirit, here's what came to me. I like convenience. I like the convenience of having what I want, when I want it, and not caring about it. I like the convenience of hopping in my car to run over to the station to get something to drink, because it's a little inconvenient to have to walk over there sometimes. I like the convenience of plastic. You know how many people have tried to get me away from these water bottles? I have every one of those SIG bottles that everybody could have. I have glass bottles, I have the metal bottles, I have the little tablets that wash them out, I have them everywhere. And still every day I grab one of these bottles. I don't like tap water, you see, because I know what's in it. We just got a thing in Buffalo Grove that said, please boil all your water because we're working with your lines under the street and we might dislodge some lead. Well, that's all I needed to hear. I don't care. I'm just going to drink out of I'm feeding my dogs water out of Kirkland water bottles. Because I like the... You got it, Grandma Nancy. Golden star for Grandma Nancy today, because I like the convenience of that. I'm thinking to myself, I got to stand here and boil water for my dogs? I'll go to Kirkland or go to Costco and spend $365 on 36 bottles of water. And I'm not saying that all convenience is bad. But what I'm saying is that what's wrong with my spirit is that I prioritize convenience over the creation. I prioritize having the car that I want that perhaps doesn't have the best carbon footprint because it's convenient to me. It's big. I like it. It's got a lot of room. People aren't scrunched up in it. I prioritize having my house ice cold in the summertime over perhaps maybe letting some air just flow through my house. I prioritize my convenience over the creation. And what I have truly forgotten is this. I think I gave you the wrong gospel lesson. What I have truly forgotten is this. It's my fault. Is that when humanity is gone, Jesus said that even if humanity cannot speak, the rocks and stones will cry out. The creation is as connected to God as I am. The rocks, the stones, the mountains, the water, the prairies, the flowers, the trees, they are as connected to God as humanity is. And in my arrogance as a human, I have forgotten that. In my arrogance as a human, I have forgotten that the world came first, and humanity, just a recent creation in the whole scheme of the time of the world. Before I leave, I want to read you something that I found. And it comes from what's called the Midrash of Ecclesiastes. It's called the Ecclesiastes Rabbah. It means it's in the Kohelet, which is part of the Midrash that the ancient rabbis did when they are trying to explain Scripture to people. And so this rabbi wrote this. When God created the first human beings, God led them all around the trees of the Garden of Eden and said, "See my works, how beautiful and praiseworthy they are. Think of this, and do not corrupt or destroy my world." One of the ancient rabbis already knew that humanity was destroying the creation that God had made. And so his interpretation was to send that very strong message: do not corrupt this. because this around us is God's work. And the verse that I didn't read to you is the one that says, because there will be no one after you to restore it. We have to take seriously that our spirits are out of sync with God if we are not caring for this environment. And we have to let the politicians fight it out, and then we have to keep doing our work, which is what Christians do. We let the politicians fight it out, and we Christians step up and do the work that needs to be done. So I challenge you to ask yourself the same hard question I asked myself yesterday. What is wrong with my spirit? That I have made the creation of God an afterthought in my life. And see where that question leads you. Amen. We come now to the time in our worship